So my first question is, what is a tree?
What is a tree?
Damn it.
That's a tough one, actually. What is a tree? Human beings have been living at the edge of forests for a very, very long time. The edge of the forest is where we belong. Trees are both familiar and alien. They don't go anyplace very fast, but they endure. Compared to humans, they're old creatures that we scarcely understand. The world of pines preceded the world in which humans could live. It takes a stretch of imagination to ask, well, what does that world look like?
We don't usually see them until they're a few years old. You can imagine how vulnerable it is in those arid soils, getting enough water through those long, hot summers. But if Mom was living there for 4,000 years, then that was a pretty good place. The estimates are less than 1% of survival. But if they survive those first few years, they're pretty good to go. And really, there isn't much that kills a bristlecone. as an historical ecologist, I think a lot about times when there were trees but no humans. And so sometimes I'll go to places where it was before humans in my mind, because I know those places well from studying them, where pines evolved. And the bristlecones and the limber pine forests are those places. I am interested in trying to understand how these trees in a mountain environment tolerated historic natural climate change, because I think that can be useful for understanding what will come in the future. Through the growth rings of the wood, I can reconstruct the past climate, and I can know how they responded. So to see a 5,000-year-old tree and to think of how much it's endured and what it's able to persist under. In 5,000 years, there's been an enormous amount of climate change. They can't move to get away. They have to stay and face what comes. They're just perfectly adapted to be in one place.
本当に小さな小さな一つの点がこんな大きな木になり、日本人はそこに神様が宿ると思ってます。樹齢1000年っていう木をもう35年も前に移植しましたけれども、その時は木を見てその木の生命力、エネルギーですね、それをとっても強く感じたんですね。で樹木に対しては、私が必ず助けるからどうしてほしいか、木がどうしてほしいか私に教えてねってお願いをしてからやるんです。木をとっても大切に思う人たちは、木は私の家族である。だからこの木が枯れてしまうと私も死んでしまうっていう人も思ってる人もいるんです。で、おじいちゃまやまたご主人が大切に育ててきて、で私がこの木を、枯らしてしまったら、同じおじいちゃまやご主人と同じお墓に入れない。
まもなく2番線渋谷
まもなく終点です。ボート手すりをお上げください。終点に近づきましたらスキーの先端を上げてください。
自分がではなくて、私の力で木を直すんではない、木に教えをいただいて木に触らせていただきます。とっても嬉しく思っています。
神道の考え方っていうのは感謝することがとても大事だと言われてます。我々の命は生かされているっていうのを神社の世界では言うんですけれど、僕らの命っていうのは一人で生きてるわけではなくて、いろんなものに支えられて、もともと人間って日本は狩猟採集民族で、森の中に木の実取ったり、獣を取ったりして生きるための生活の糧を得てましたね。だから生の恵みを得る場所と同時に、昔の時代ですから、何か獣に当たられて怪我をしてしまったら病院もない時代で死んでしまうかもしれない。だから森や山、海っていうのは生の恵みを得られる場所と同時に死の恐怖を与えてくれる場所でもあったわけで、今の八百万に見える最初の基盤だと思います。小玉、まあ木の中に住む精霊みたいな感じですよね。それぞれ一本一本の中に姿が見えるものでも正直言ってないと思ってます。そこにある存在に対して感じて感謝をするっていう、
神社、お寺、神社の、境内に植えられている大きな木を、やはり神様として祀る、祈る、そういう習慣が古くからある。地球にも命があるって私は思っていまして、その森の中に入ると、地球の時時時っていう鼓動も伝わってくるような気持ちになって、地球と私が一体化する。
の中とかって超音波も出てるんですよ。で目に見えないいろんな成分も浮かんでいて、そういうのを全て吸収できるわけじゃないけれどもちょっとでも近づけられるように、そう心の中でのさっきのイメージですよね。毛穴が全部クリアになって森の大気だったりそういった音も全部含めて体の中に通過して循環するような、そういうイメージは持ちますね。スノーボードじゃなくてスノーサーフィンなんだなって思うようになったんですけど、山の地形に合わせて海の波を乗るように地形と会話をしながら乗れるところが面白いなって思ってます。森の中で何か滑っててあっていう瞬間ってみんなあると思うんです。じゃあちょうどハイクしてちょっと上の木々の中で休んでる瞬間かもしれないし、自然の一部なんだなって感じる瞬間ってその瞬間じゃなきゃわからないから言葉で表現するのってとても難しいですよね。それぞれの人たちにみんなの瞬間があって
I was 7, and I was with my ski group, and I could remember them weaving through the trees, and I don't know what happened to me, but I just remember at one point being lost in the trees. And I just sat there wooing for a little while and realizing that I was alone. Growing up, tree skiing, you had to have a call. I a lot of times lose the person that I'm skiing with. And then all of a sudden, my friend will be like, "Hey," as like a signaling beacon. You'll get the reverberation from someone else. And then we know we're really close together. It's kind of a cool way of communicating through the trees without being able to see someone.
The forest is a holistic place. It's a place that's connected. You know, since I was a little kid, I played in forests like this. They're like treasure chests full of biodiversity, of genes of species that are really, really old. You know, that this is a special little heartbeat in the landscape where these things reside. 600 years is a long time. You know, it's 12 times as old as I am. And so you get that sense of history, of many spirits have been here before. Not just human spirits, but many creatures have lived here and they still live here. And I get that sense that I'm not here alone, ever. I feel like I've entered into this cathedral and the pews are full. I walk in and I feel at home, because I feel like I'm in this community of all these creatures. Pretty much every day of the year in the winter I ski in some way. I'm always in the forest. I don't think that I would have been a scientist unless I'd had these connections myself. Being out here is the source of that science. Let's label this branch with the C14 labeled gas, the radioactive gas, and the tree will take up that gas through photosynthesis. These are my people, and we're talking, and they're showing me things, and I'm saying, okay, I'll go study that. So yeah, it's a constant back and forth conversation between me and these guys. Oh, this is really hot. Oh wow, it's really, really, really labeled. If you go into an old growth forest and it's quite dark, it can be quite shady, and you can see little plants growing in the understory or seedlings that are kind of cropping up, and there's not a lot of light, so the big old trees are competing with those little seedlings for light. But they're able to live. Well, why is that? If they can't photosynthesize very well, how could they live? As soon as you walk in a forest, most of us look around and we go, oh, when we see that big old tree. And so this one caught my eye. Mother trees are the biggest ones and the oldest ones in the forest. We've been able to trace that this tree would be connected to, all these trees around it, as far as you can see. These big old trees are like the center, the hubs, and that they're nurturing the young seedlings around them. As the seed is germinating, the mother tree is communicating with the seed. Sometimes in a really dense, shaded forest, Those seedlings can sit there for 100 years and just be feeding off the mother tree, waiting for a little gap to open up, for a tree to fall over or a branch to fall. Just waiting patiently. Just waiting. My time will come. This fungal highway is kind of like a direct way to communicate. So you can think of the network as kind of like an internet or a bunch of telephone lines, and the trees will call each other up and say, hey, did you know that there's an insect over here? Or, hey, I got some extra nitrogen, do you want some? They communicate all kinds of things. They communicate about poisons, they communicate about insects and diseases, they communicate about resource availability, they can communicate about their stresses, their happiness, or whether they're replete or not. So when you're skiing through these forests, there's still this communication is going on between these trees in the winter. It's very much alive. When we look at the pattern of the mycorrhizal network, when we actually dissect it and look at all the mathematical relationships, it's the same pattern as a neural network. And it's evolved for efficiency of communication. And that leads you to think, well, it's kind of like a brain. It's a highly conserved structure that's evolved because it works. If you're to look for that, then that resides at the community level. It's not in the individual tree level, it's actually at the forest level. And then I started thinking about the materials that are moving through that network. When we look at the actual compounds, it turns out that some of them are exactly the same as neurotransmitters that are in our brains. Intelligence is a word that we ascribe to humans and animals, and we tend to associate it with nervous systems and brains. Plants don't have nervous systems, and they don't have brains like we do with neurons and axons. So in the traditional sense of if we restrict our thoughts of intelligence to the physical brain and the physical nervous system, well then, yeah, no, plants don't have that, trees don't have that, but they do have intelligence in a broader sense in that they are perceptive and they receive information. They make decisions. They have memories. They can learn. These are all attributes that we ascribe to intelligence. They have all those capabilities, all those skills. And they've actually been evolving those skills for millions of years, hundreds of millions of years, far longer than the humans or the animals, which came on much later in evolutionary history. So their ability to carry out these life skills are highly evolved and I would say highly intelligent. The origin of that intelligence, I think, is much more complex and not that different than we find in human beings. As we look at these old forests more and more, we realize that these are the biggest carbon storehouses in the world, really, our old growth forests. I think we need to say, is that where our values lie? Is that what the most valuable use of those forests is? Is it for a product that's been valuable to British Columbians for the last 100 years? Well, maybe that product is not going to be as valuable as keeping carbon in the ground and having clean water and clean air. I think the most important thing is to be educated and aware, and then to become involved in what's happening in your local forest. Being educated and aware about forests means going into those forests, spending time in them, learning about them, being part of the forest, not being separate from it. Then you actually start caring about the forest because you know it. It becomes part of who you are. It's important to us to know that it's there, that there's something wild there, that, the wild creatures can live there and that they carry on the life that we depend on and we strive for ourselves.
I marvel at being able to have stayed in one place. So to see a 5,000-year-old tree and to think of how much it's endured and what it's able to persist under. Really, there isn't much that kills a bristlecone. They basically just poop out and eventually topple over.
永遠の命はありません。人も動物たちも樹木たちもいつか終わりが来ます。で、それは自然の循環として受け止めています。土に帰るってことですね。
だから一つの命が終わってまた自然に帰って、また次の命を育んでいくっていうそのサイクルの中にあるのかな。
The death of a tree is not the death of a forest, just like the death of a person is not the death of their community. Earlier today we saw a tree fall over. When that tree fell over, it starts sending signals to the neighbors around it. What we found out is that those dying trees start sending carbon. So they're sending their energy and I think their wisdom to the trees that are still alive around them so that the community can stay whole. The death is really life in the forest, right? It's really just a transformation of the energy from, one creature to another.
Okay, one last question. What do you think that we might be able to learn from trees?
その前にぜひマイツリーを持ってください。そしてその木にいろんな話をしていただいて、自分の心の中の木を持っていただけば、私はその答えはおのずと出てくるような気がします。木はあなたを嫌いとは言わないから。